ONS-5. One of the largest single convoys ever undertaken.
Flood torpedo tubes! 1, 2, and 4.
Janet's fleet is expanding, and he will not rest until he sent every convoy ship to the bottom of the North Atlantic.
41 U-boats. A wolf pack like we've never seen before.
Ladies, remember, every one of you plays an essential part. Never forget that.
Don't overestimate your opponent. Strike him dead.
Escort ships, half Raspberry! Half Raspberry!
We're dealing with a new weapon. Come on, ladies, think.
Your men have forced their way into my operations room. And now you expect me to talk to you.
This is the breakthrough we've been waiting for.
There's no going back.
Ten days into its journey to Canada, convoy ONS-5 has been battered and dispersed by gale force winds. As the storm passes, the largest wolf pack of the Second World War begins to stalk the convoy. Following the departure of Commander Peter Gretton to refuel in Newfoundland, Admiral Horton assesses the damage.
We've got Gretton's report. Before detaching, he said he could only account for 32 ships. That leaves what?
9 or 10?
God knows where they are. Scattered all over the ocean for now, probably. And he sent another escort to assemble them.
Until we get any further information, shall I put the stragglers here, astern?
No air cover and down to 7 escorts. I hope this new man, Sherwood, is up to it.
Following Gretton's departure, Robert Sherwood, Lieutenant Commander of HMS Tay, is now in charge of the stricken convoy.
There's sitting ducks out there, bobbing around like corks. We need to start rounding them up as soon as we can.
Sherwood is now your #1 man. He's the commander in charge. But lo and behold, there he is, literally in the eye of the storm.
Multiple intercepts. Port bow, port quarter, starboard beam, starboard quarter. About 20 U-boats.
This is the crisis, because this is the point when the maximum number of U-boats are engaged and the escorts are reduced.
Prepare for contact. Prepare for contact! Prepare for contact!
The Germans can exploit gaps in the defenses and maximize the number of kills they make on the convoy.
You, here!
In spring 1943, after the German army's defeat in the Battle of Stalingrad, Dönitz is still gaining successes in terms of sinking enemy vessels. So strong hopes lie from this side of Hitler on Dönitz to be one of the men who is still able to win the war for Germany.
What he really wanted to do was wipe out a convoy altogether, to demonstrate to the Allies that they could not venture onto this ocean, that that convoy could lose every ship in it. That was his goal.
Due to an intelligence blackout, the Allies are unaware of the unprecedented scale of the wolf pack that Karl Dönitz is assembling.
We're covering 400 miles. West-northwest to east-southeast. 41 U-boats. A wolf pack like we've never seen before.
We're getting sightings. Ships drifting miles from the escorts.
What are they waiting for? Message! You are better placed than you ever were before. I am certain that you will fight with everything you've got. Don't overestimate your opponent. Strike him dead.
"6 miles behind the convoy, a straggling merchant ship is spotted by U-boat 707.
Flood torpedo tubes! 1, 2, and 4!
Dönitz has made many promises to the Fuhrer, and now that he holds that rank, he has to prove the German Navy can deliver a victory. Dönitz, by this stage of the war, is aware that this is a duel between him and Western Approach's command.
So many stragglers, miles away from the convoy. There could be strikes that Sherwood doesn't even know about, ships that have already gone.
We have to focus on what we know for now. Sherwood has done our course. He'll know what to do.
Will he? It's that simple, is it?
Did I say it was simple?
It's one thing to teach them here, in this little room. It's quite another out there. If we don't get results soon, if we don't prove our worth, we may as well pack our bags.
We will prove our worth, sir.
I wish I had your confidence, Laidlaw.
It's not confidence, sir. It's determination.
I'm just expressing a reasonable concern. If we don't do that, complacency sets in.
If you're saying I am complacent, then you are mistaken. I am determined not to feel defeated. Now, can I have the convoy report, please?
For Roberts and Laidlaw, the pressure is on because they're just hoping that when the weather improves and the U-boats do start really circling, that the Watu tactics kick in, that they'll be able to show once and for all that they work.
As the convoy travels into the Black Pit, where there is no Allied air cover, the Wolf Pack begins to penetrate the screen of escorts.
This is a crucial phase, and this is where the convoy escort commander comes into his own.
Message from Admiralty. Heavy and continuous traffic in all directions.
One of the key benefits of wargaming is that it allows officers to practice and create a sort of muscle memory about responses to different scenarios. They just do it intuitively.
Convoy, full steam ahead. Loose strife. Proceed astern and assist Northern Spray with the survivors.
3 merchant ships are torpedoed at close range, all sinking within 19 minutes of each other.
They're in columns 1 and 2. Escort ships, half Raspberry. Half Raspberry!
Half Raspberry. Similar to Raspberry, however, some escorts are held back at the group commander's discretion to protect the convoy, whilst the other escorts hunt for U-boats.
Half Raspberry is the brainchild of Jean Laidlaw, as was Raspberry. She's our statistician, she's one of our pioneering female accountants, and she's someone who is quite literally taking the fight to Hitler via our escort commander, Sherwood, who's falling back on a plan designed by a woman. I bet she burnt the candle at both ends, looking at those fresh sets of statistics. How do you confront 8 wolf packs? How do you confront an enemy that's 30+ U-boats strong? This is a totally different fight.
Once the escort ships are in a half Raspberry formation, a pattern of depth charges are fired.
And this tactic, the thing that he'd learnt from Watu, Now, they've no way of knowing if those depth charges were successful or not. They can only hope that they can continue in safety.
In Belfast Castle, Christian Oldham, awaiting news of her fiancé John Lamb, refuses to leave the plotting room.
It was the only place where you could have any contact with what was happening to John. So naturally, I needed to stay there. And although they tried to persuade me to, I probably lay down on the chair or something, but there was no way that I could leave the plot until the battle was decided.
Christian doesn't yet know that HMS Oribe is about to play a key part in the most important sea battle of the Second World War.
Aztec contact, 1,200 yards.
Around midnight, the Oribe, which is one of Horton's support ships that has come to rescue this convoy, gets an Aztec ping on a U-boat, and it goes in pursuit.
And John was woken up by a huge bang, which he thought was them going aground. But as they couldn't possibly go aground, he realized, because they were right out in the middle of the ocean, he realized that he couldn't be there. What could it be? In 2 seconds, he was back on the bridge, and there he found that his ship had rammed the U-boat and was actually lying on top of it, so that he could then see the extraordinary sight going on.
As HMS Oribe heads to Newfoundland to refuel, the whole of the U-boat crew is left to perish.
During the Battle of the Atlantic, on both sides, a process of brutalization took place. And this led to incidents where, contrary to the laws of the sea and also international law, survivors were not picked up.
There is chaos. There's the sound of depth charges going off. Ships that have been struck, and there are flames visible in the darkness, silhouetting the other vessels around them, making them increasingly at risk of a torpedo attack. They're now perfectly in target, silhouetted for the U-boats. In addition, there are escorts racing from point to point, following the tactics that have been defined by the escort commander, and the U-boats hovering on the periphery, looking for an opportunity to work their way through to the convoy to target their victim.
Torpedo fire. Column 2. Dolius is hit. Artichoke. Artichoke.
Wake up. Come on. Let's be having you. From Sherwood. 24 attacks were attempted on the convoy during the night. All repulsed. 5 U-boats sunk. Vidette claims hits. Loose Strife depth charged the U-boat which surfaced and blew up. Sunflower has 1 depth charge remaining. Sunflower rammed 1. Snowflake destroyed 1 by depth charge. And Oribe rammed 1. Well done, all of you. Thank you. Well done. Well, as you were,
They would have been absolutely thrilled and delighted if they'd even managed to sink one. But to sink 5 U-boats means that the tactics that they've put in place are clearly working. And what it really means in the overall war for the Atlantic and to Dönitz is that everything is changing now. It's just so important, and it means an enormous amount to the entire team of the Wrens at Western Approaches.
Jean! It's quite a night.
Well, can I take heart?
That is your prerogative. All I can say is that I think there will be a lot more food on our plates soon.
Did they use our tactics? Do we know?
I believe so.
What, any U-boat strikes?
5, can you believe it?
And to think we used to count ourselves lucky if we managed to sink one.
Indeed.
How many ships were lost?
13, I'm afraid.
5 U-boats to 13 ships. That's an unsustainable ratio. Dönitz can't keep going on like that, can he?
Absolutely not. His fleet would be wiped out in a matter of months. He's outmaneuvered. Our technology and our tactics have outwitted him.
I always knew they would. This is the breakthrough we've been waiting for.
There's no going back.
Complacency, Gilbert.
Touché.
We never know what Dönitz has up his sleeve. But for now, I think this deserves a celebration. Would you care to join me for a cup of warm tea and a stale scone, sir?
Don't mind if I do, Laidlaw. Might even eat one of the darn things this time.
This is vindication for Roberts and Laidlaw entirely. Their tactics are not only working, they're working in the most difficult conditions against ridiculous numbers of boats under constant attack. They must have felt elated.
It means that tonnage isn't disappearing. It means goods, fuel, food are coming back into England. It means that people's lives are being saved. All of a sudden, Dönitz is on the run. Dönitz is summoned to the Wolf's Lair, the Wolfschanze, Hitler's headquarters on the Eastern Front.
You know what our people are calling that convoy?
Hitler is furious and he rants against Dönitz. How dare you? You promised me these wolf packs were going to destroy and decimate these Allied convoys. We were going to conquer Britain. And now what's happening?
It is not our tactics that have failed. That would be to ignore the real truth. The enemy's new technology is making it impossible for us in the Atlantic. Their new radar can find us in 0 visibility. In a fog, we are fighting blind. We have losses of 15 to 20 boats a month.
War is a numbers game. The bottom line, you've got to have the statistics on your side. And what we see is quite literally the tide turning in May of 1943. We have an unsustainable level of U-boat losses.
It's not defeat. We withdraw, we regroup, we develop the Wren, and when we are ready, we go back to the Atlantic. We will prevail.
The Wren, a new weapon that Dönitz has been developing since the beginning of the war, is about to be launched.
Hitler believes that other weapons, his so-called wonder weapons, will attain the victory, and merely slightly improving a U-boat isn't as exciting as the new weapons that he's looking at, the new weapons that promise victory.
Dönitz has gone through really this incredible fall from grace. March riding high. Now, by May, it's all over. He starts to withdraw his U-boats to the Azores because there's no point in keeping them in the Atlantic any longer. This is known in Germany as Schwarze Mai, Black May. This is where Peter Gretton, the former commander of ONS-5, comes back into the story. He is returning from St. John's, Newfoundland. They call a Watu tactic observant. And because of this, a U-boat is sunk. And one of the victims of that sinking is actually Karl Dönitz's son, who dies in the attack.
Actually, Dönitz lost his two sons, who were also naval officers, in action. I certainly believe that he felt grief and it was a big loss for him, but it did not affect him as a naval officer and as a professional soldier. Well, it's very similar to the British approach of keeping a stiff upper lip.
Following the relocation of Dönitz's U-boats to the Azores, the Allies are now able to transport vast amounts of supplies and troops across the North Atlantic.
And of course, this allows Britain and America to plan the re-invasion of Europe. They can push the Nazis back now, once they get all their supplies.
But the Battle of the Atlantic isn't over, and the work of the Wrens is not yet done.
I was working in Whitehall. I had a little office below the stairs, all to myself. And the walls of the office were all covered in huge scale maps of northern France, which was where we were about to have our great battle, which was going to be called D-Day. My job was to draw a map of every compass bearing on that particular point, so that any captain of a ship who was intending to invade from that point would be able to identify exactly where he was. And that was my job, which was quite interesting and extremely secret, of course.
The date and location of D-Day are known only to the very top of Allied command. But it is an open secret on both sides of the Atlantic that preparations are underway.
It's strategy now. Stealth, cunning, this. When they come, we'll be ready. The German spirit won't be defeated. I know what we have to do.
The problem is, Dönitz has a surprise up his sleeve. The question is can they work out what it is before a catastrophe happens?
September 1943, 4 months after ONS-5. 2 convoys, delayed by poor weather, come under ferocious U-boat attack.
Roberts, come and see this.
They're going for our escorts. 2 so far.
One could be a misfire too, that's intentional.
They seem to be goading us to go for them. And then when we line them up, the stern of the escort is blown.
We always knew he'd come back at us. It's just a question of time.
And now the Germans have thought of their own tactics. So they've got this new weapon, and they're not using them against the merchant ships. They're using them against the escort ships. And that is a big change. Now it's aggressor against aggressor.
I know some of you have loved ones and friends in the 2 convoys that are under attack tonight. All the more reason for us to focus now on how we stop them.
There's a difference with this attack, a crucial difference. It marks a change of strategy. It's not the merchant ships Dönitz is targeting first anymore, it's the escorts.
The U-boats seem to be goading our escorts to engage, and then they're struck astern.
The U-boat begins to dive only when the escort closes in. Why might that be? Come on, ladies, think.
Sound?
They need our ships to move.
Good. It needs the sound of our escort's propeller to find its target.
We're dealing with a new weapon. The German Navy acoustic torpedo.
And we need to work out a new tactic to stop it.
This is exactly the point of Watu. Something weird happens, tell Watu. They will go away and think about it and explore the options.
Roberts and Laidlaw know that the acoustic torpedo targets the loudest sound, the twin propellers of the escort ships.
So they look at how these acoustic torpedoes are working and they find out some key points. Firstly, the U-boat wants the escort ship coming towards them so they can fire the acoustic torpedo. And that is when you turn your ship and you go in the other direction. The acoustic torpedoes will miss you. That's when you turn back on the U-boat and you go full pelt and you ram it.
So, that's how it works. We should think of a code name.
Please, not another fruit.
The new tactic, codenamed Step Aside, works on 3 principles.
You evade, you detect, you attack.
What is it?
Evade, detect, attack.
Step Aside is used for the rest of the war and continues to be used by NATO after the war. And this is the ultimate accolade for Watu's ability to develop new and original, effective tactics against submarines.
Whilst the war still rages, Christian Oldham is reunited with her fiancé briefly on his return from the battle. In December 1943, they meet up for the 3rd time to be married.
It was a very good party. And then we were lent a baby Austin, which we drove to the Savoy Hotel as part of our honeymoon. It was all great fun. It was really such a splendid idea to be able to get married and rush off and drive by car, just ourselves without anybody else. It was very good. We enjoyed ourselves.
Ah. I have news. I received a letter.
You have? That's good.
Not just any letter. I am to be honored. A commander of the most excellent order of the British Empire. CBE.
That's marvelous.
And there's another thing. I wondered, would you accompany me to the palace?
Oh.
I couldn't have done it without you.
Of course.
Thank you. Splendid.
None of the women of Watu received any honours, not even Jean Laidlaw, who was almost equal to Gilbert Roberts in her efforts at devising these war games.
It's really very moving to look at the history of the Wrens at Western Approaches, the contribution that they made, the sacrifices that each of them made in their own personal lives. And they really did do an enormous amount, actually, to help win the Battle of the Atlantic. None of them were ever honored officially.
As D-Day gets closer, one of the few people to be involved in the highly secretive planning is Gilbert Roberts.
Sir.
There was a genuine concern if Dönitz understood that there would be large ships maneuvering in position. If a U-boat gets amongst those, it is going to kill thousands of troops or destroy hundreds of tanks.
I've just got back from London. We'll be teaching a new course, 3 days, to include tactics on patrols in shallow water, escort duty of unusual objects, attacks in confined waters.
Tactics that could be deployed, say, in a water-based invasion.
It is not our place to speculate or share our speculations, Jean. Talk is cheap.
Yes, sir.
Dönitz is still out there. Let's focus on that.
Of course. What can I do?
And in fact, when the monarch himself is informed that Watu has been tasked with this, he actually states to Roberts that his confidence is now complete. He is more than sure that U-boats will not get towards the invasion fleet.
D-Day has come. Early this morning, the Allies began the assault on the northwestern face of Hitler's European fortress.
I heard it on the radio. I was more than frightfully excited, I can tell you. I didn't know whether they ever used my maps, but they had them anyway.
D-Day was the largest amphibious operation in the history of the world. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of men, and even more importantly, their supplies. The trucks, the jeeps, the tanks that had to get across the channel, the food to feed them.
I think we all felt enormous relief, and not least for our free French friends, that at last Europe was going to be freed. We always had absolute confidence that that would be the conclusion.
It was the most wonderful moment of my life.
Misled by the Allies to believe that D-Day is going to happen near Calais, the Germans are totally unprepared for the landings in Normandy.
Dönitz is absolutely shocked. So what does he do? He goes in for a sort of a reckless, strange order to his men.
Every enemy vessel is a target. It is to be attacked. Even if this carries the risk of loss of one's own life.
Many U-boat captains see this order as a kind of a suicide mission. It is like Dönitz is kind of saying, I even sacrifice my sons on the altar of the fatherland. So I'm not expecting something from my crews or from my commanders that I wouldn't do myself.
Only 35 U-boats scrambled to Normandy. Deterred by Watu tactics and the vast invading force, they sink only 23 Allied vessels.
It is my belief that if Watu had not been deterring U-boats through the deployment of escorts, the use of mines, etc., that there would have been probably major attacks on the fleet. Even though there were a few U-boats, this was the decisive battle. The Germans would have taken every risk if they had a chance of disrupting that invasion.
And in the end, 5 U-boats limp back to their ports. This is a terrible, terrible blow for Dönitz. Once the high, mighty admiral of the German Navy, he now has 5 U-boats back from Normandy landings.
Night, ladies. Night.
Speech?
Yes, speech.
No. I will leave that to the admirals. But I will say this. We may not be awarded CBEs, but we are honoured to have served our country. Every one of us has helped to save fathers, sons, brothers, uncles, sweethearts. And if you don't believe me, here, look at this. Ta-da! Look who it is. Captain Roberts. June, you're the performer. You should read it.
Yes, here it is. So thorough is the course, so clever the setting of each game, that many naval officers fighting actual U-boats in the Atlantic suddenly realized that they first saw the same situation present itself when it was only a game on a make-believe ocean.
Isn't it a little strange to be put in a magazine, giving the game away? Excuse the pun. When the war's not even finished.
It is strange, but it must have been cleared for publication. They must want the Germans to know about us, in case they start again.
We call it today an information campaign. That is where you put a message out which is designed to influence your adversary's thinking, to deter them from action, or to confine their thinking, to concern them, to add an element of risk to their decision-making.
I know you're too modest to think this, June, but you really should think about modelling or acting when this is all over. Everyone says it.
You should. You really should. It'd be a waste of that beautiful face if you didn't.
What about you, Jean? Will you go back to the accountancy?
If they'll have me. A mere woman.
Yeah. I mean, you only helped win the Battle of the Atlantic, so... Not that we can tell anyone it was us.
Good girls, polite girls, didn't show off. Heavens above. No, that's not what women in the 1940s were encouraged to do. So the Wrens, that crucial crack team in Watteau at the top of Derby House, didn't leave much of a paper trail.
Well,
cheers to us.
Cheers.
As the Allies push through Nazi-occupied Europe, Karl Dönnitz's life takes a bizarre twist.
On the 29th of April 1945, Berlin has been under siege by the Soviets, and they are desperate at this point. There are children with guns in the streets trying to defend the city, and they just can't. Hitler knows this, and he gives up. He commits suicide. But before doing this, he names his successor. And that is Dönitz.
Dönitz had once seen himself as one of the sort of saviors of Germany along with Hitler. They were going to create this sort of brave new German Reich. And there he is. He's the one who's responsible for signing the unconditional surrender of Germany at the end of World War II.
Enter.
For this lowest point, really, in German history.
Overseeing the unconditional surrender of Germany, Dönitz betrays Hitler and the Reich. But his leadership is in name only. After 23 days, he is arrested by the Allies and charged with war crimes.
Thank you.
But before Dönitz's fate is sealed by the Allies, Gilbert Roberts faces one final challenge.
On the 23rd of May, 1945, Gilbert Roberts is asked to go to Flensburg. And who's in Flensburg?
Good afternoon, Admiral. I am on Admiral Sir Max Horton's staff. I'm here to gather information about German U-boat practice.
As Führer, I have a number of duties to perform in Luxembourg.
Very well. I will not keep you.
One can only imagine this encounter between these two men who for years have been locked in a deathly struggle for mastery over the Atlantic. And yet there they are in these sort of peaceful surroundings at the end of the war, looking at one another and sizing one another up, and then finally having to say goodbye. He comes across, ironically, a photograph of himself, which had been printed in a magazine, and it says, you know, this is your enemy.
Well, well, well. That's how he recognized me.
Your men have forced their way into my operations room. I've been waiting 5 hours in the parade ground. They've broken into my cabin, and now you expect me to talk to you.
Es tut mir leid. Admiral Gott, did you have a tactical unit similar to that at Watty?
No. No such need. The men did all the tactical work on the North Atlantic. It surprises me that women would be involved at this level, especially when they had never seen battle.
And it surprised Gott that women were given such an important role in naval operations. They did have the equivalent of Wrens in the German Navy, but they weren't given anything like the responsibilities of the women of Britain.
Do you know any of our tactics?
Raspberry, I have heard of. Very complicated, but useful if all the escorts acted according to the stated plan.
This is so amazing because, of course, it brings this whole story back to Jean Laidlaw, who named this tactic Raspberry as a kind of raspberry to Hitler.
Thank you.
Unbeknown to Gott, a second recorder secreted in a suitcase is recording, even when Robert's recorder is switched off.
So, why, in your opinion, did the U-boats not prevail?
Detection technology. Your radar meant we would not operate economically on the surface.
Anything else?
Superior training of your escorts.
And our tactics? Did they play a part in our victory? I noticed the photograph.
Perhaps.
The information gained by Roberts from Gott is a real vindication for Jean Laidlaw. She managed to get into the brains of U-boat captains. She understood their tactics just from her wargaming strategies. It was an amazing vindication for her and everybody at Watty.
For his war efforts, Karl Dönitz is tried, along with other top-ranking Nazis, in Nuremberg.
Dönitz denies any knowledge of the Holocaust, even though he's known to be a virulent anti-Semite. He's an absolute dyed-in-the-wool supporter of Hitler and Hitler's war aims, and yet he manages at the Nuremberg trials to present himself as something quite different.
Dönitz is accused of breaking international naval law by not rescuing enemy survivors. But his lawyers forced the court to recognize the same behavior in the Allied fleet. As a result, Dönitz avoids execution and is sentenced to 10 years in Spandau jail.
Fire.
U-boat ace Otto Kretschmer is never charged with war crimes. Resuming an illustrious naval career, he rises to become Chief of Staff at the Baltic NATO Command and is featured in the 90s computer game Aces of the Deep.
Smoke on horizon, Captain!
It was fairly easy for me to penetrate the screen of the escorts and getting into the convoy program.
You know, their aces lacked one quality that you have in abundance. Imagination.
I've never seen myself like that.
You put yourself into the mind of our enemies. In the middle of the convoy, in the chaos. Engines silenced till the danger had passed. It was you who insisted that was their modus operandi, and it was. Admiral Gott confirmed it.
Well, thank you, but it was a team effort.
It was. But we couldn't have done it without you.
Likewise.
Laidlaw.
Sir. Sir. Do you mind?
I would look the other way. The Battle of the Atlantic is against our two great enemies, the U-boat and the cruel sea.
We will prevail. I know we will.
Well done, Laidlaw.
After years of ill health and campaigning for arthritis charities, Gilbert Roberts, CBE, dies in 1986.
I find their story tremendously moving. It's inspirational. It's just a symbol of what women were capable of if given the chance, even in the dire circumstances of the Second World War. So really their story should be celebrated, should be written large, and should be really commemorated as much as possible.
After the war, Jean Laidlaw resumes her career as an accountant and lives quietly with her partner Beryl until her death in 2008.
So meet Ren rating Janet Okel, the woman who beat you 5-0.
Janet Okel returns to her old life near Liverpool. She dies in 2005, less than 10 miles from the Western Approach's tactical unit.
Never surrender.
June Duncan enjoys a successful career as a top model and actor, later becoming the assistant editor of Harper's Bazaar. In 1945, Vera Lawton Matthews, wartime director of the Wrens,
I've got a secret little plan.
is made a dame. She dies aged 71 in 1951.
What have I done, you may ask, compared to what my boy has to put up with? Dodging submarines in the Atlantic. When I have talked with women, how often, when I admired their pluck, have I heard them say, "Oh well, it's not much. I'm just doing my best to help us win the war."
The Watu Wrens may not have received any honors, nor did they publish their memoirs, but they did something far more important. They recaptured the savage waves of the Atlantic for the Allies, and so delivered them victory.